4. Can't read writing. He's conducted groundbreaking research into the social behaviour and movement patterns of these much maligned predators. Brad is an associate academic of the Centre for Compassionate Conservation and is based at the University of Western Sydney. In 2010, Brad published a book on dingoes with the CSIRO and was awarded a Winston Churchill Memorial Trust travel fellowship, with which he used to travel to the United States to meet up with people like Suzanne. In 2012, he made a documentary on dingoes that Brad's about to tell you about a little bit. So, to talk to you about dingoes tonight, please welcome Brad Purcell.
Thank you very much, Dan. And thanks for having me, and thanks for coming, everybody. It's quite a good turnout for Suzanne's first show, whilst we're away. And ladies and gentlemen, Suzanne Stone. How about the work she's done? Isn't it incredible? So I never realised, or I never actually fathomed how quite controversial working with dingoes would be. And it gets harder and harder because the way I've sort of taken, or the tack that I've chosen to use, is to actually use the science to adapt the management. But the science often doesn't agree with the management, so you need to actually try to work it all in a bit differently, and there's policies in place to stop it, because it's a pest, and you can't protect a pest, and you can't do anything to help save a pest. But anyway, let's see what you guys think of all this work that I've been doing over the last few years, and might have ways to help actually implement it, or to make the changes. So to start off, there is a major dichotomy with dingoes. First, we have pure dingoes. Who believes in dingo purity? Just want to see where the shoes are going to be thrown from. And who believes that there's wild dogs causing problems? A couple out here in the middle? All right. Can you guys sit next to them, just watch those for me? Thanks. And then right down the middle we have hybrids. Okay, so everyone's always saying, you don't know if it's a hybrid or a wild dog, or if they're pure dingoes, and what are we trying to protect? Where is this management going? So in the Blue Mountains, what I found from the 10 samples, I didn't kill any of the dogs, but from the 10 samples we collected, we found that they were all pure. They all fit within Laurie Corbett's original purity measurements. And genetically we found that they were all hybrids. So what this here shows, is that come up on screen? Very good. What this shows is the proportion of rare alleles and the average of dingo alleles amongst domestic dogs. So there's not much there, and amongst captive bred dingoes. So all the dingoes in the Blue Mountains go from almost like a dog to a very pure dingo. But essentially they're all hybrids because they all live in the same habitat together. And morphologically, so sort of talking about the size and shape of them, maybe not always the colour, but definitely the size and shape, they're all dingoes. They're all about 600 millimetres high, the right width. They all had, even with the colour variation, they all had white paws and white socks, all the things that people love to see in dingoes. And when we looked at genetics in a different fashion, so because I believe that microsatellites should be used to determine relatedness rather than distinct purity subclasses, it showed that every single individual fit into these familial groups. So all these columns is a different dingo, and the different colours represent what group they're from. So we've got the red group, the green group, which has a little bit of admixture from the red group. The dark blue group, this yellow group, which were from St. Columba's School, they were killed because they were starting to take food from the playground. These pink guys, which were kind of dispersed around the park. This light blue group, and then this is an orange group just down on the end. This is where they were dispersed throughout the park, so it's a bit of an angle. North's going off to your right, Katoomba's over here above the mouse, or to the right of the mouse. Mittagong's down here to the left of the mouse. The Oaks is below the mouse, basically. So the green group lived around this area called Tenalley Cove. The light blue group lived around Druryland Creek, Druryland River. Then the red group lived down on the Douglas Scarp side basically. And what we noticed one year, because we trapped these over a series of 3 years, was that these guys, these red guys here, had actually just formed a new pack, basically, in the Druryland Creek area. And then we've also got the orange group, which are living up at Scott's Main Range. Now the good thing about using these genes is you can actually look at stuff like dispersal. So one dog from the green group was caught up at Scott's Main Range. Same with a dog from the light blue group. And then a dog from the orange group was caught down in the green group. So you can start to see how the mixture, the genetic mixture between packs could be occurring in wild situations. And in the original studies that occurred in Western Australia, the guy said that he noticed there was colour variations between the packs. So one pack had more white dogs than another pack, which was more tan. So I thought, well, I've been pushing the button. So I thought, well, let's see how these colours relate. And the light blue group were basically tan and sable. And then the green group were basically black and tan and sable. And then the red group were your multicoloured pack. So suddenly starting to realise how it's all in the family, how these colour genes are being passed on to each other. But I'll show you, so this pack lived in an area which I call Douglas Scarp area, and later on I'll point out how the pack looks these days. So when I was out there, because I was trying to determine the function of these wild dog dingo hybrids or pure dingoes, whatever they were out there, I also looked at their diet by collecting their scats and determining what they were eating and when they were eating it. So I did about 24 field trips or 26 field trips over the time, and this shows, the blue line shows when they were eating swamp wallaby, and the purple line shows when they were eating brush-tailed possum. Now when you relate this to the season that they're in, March, April, May is breeding season, June, July, August is when the pups are probably starting to be born. September, October, November is when the pups are really young and the parents aren't travelling too far. So what we can see here is they started to eat more swamp wallaby. In the breeding season they ate heaps of swamp wallaby and they ate a lot less brush-tailed possum. So the age structure of the population is a bit more adult. When the pups were born, the adults obviously weren't travelling as fast, so they were eating more brush-tailed possum and a lot less swamp wallaby. If you compare this sort of scenario, so that happened again the next year, and it happened at the other site, so I had two sites. This site is, I think, the Tenali, the ex-farmland site, so it also happened at the Gully site, which was further north at Scott's Main Range. And when you compare it with the foxes, you can see the foxes don't really care, they're just scavenging, they'll eat whatever they can eat when they can eat it. So that's the difference between a hypercarnivore and a mesocarnivore. So in the Australian context, your foxes are your mesocarnivore because they don't eat animals that weigh more than themselves. But the dingoes will hunt as a pack to kill a kangaroo because they need to, because it's 90 kilograms and dingoes are only 20 kilograms. So they need to help each other. We also got some really interesting data from GPS collars. So this is just one example. I've got another example of a male that dispersed in the breeding season, then came straight back to his territory, then he dispersed again and came back to his territory and dropped the collar off for us. But this guy here is important because he has shown us the border patrol movement. So we put the GPS collar on him to take locations every 10 minutes after we release it, and we put another one on a younger juvenile in the pack. And we release him in his habitat, which we say is optimal habitat for optimal foraging. In ecology, it's like the perfect place. You don't want to be anywhere else. You should have everything that you need. Oh. That's the data we got back from him over 52 days. Most of his time was spent right down there on the flat. And then on day 14, he did a walk like this. With the juvenile as well, actually. They mimic each other basically. Straight back to the core area. Days 26 and 27. Whoop, sorry, I'll go back. He went north. You know where he's going to end up. straight back to his core area again. And on days 40 and 41, he'd walk like this. Start at the same spot, left about 7 a.m.
Ooh.
Got there about 11 p.m.
On the same day.
17 kilometres around the border. And the next day, did a short trip and then went straight back home. So the entire journey was about 30 kilometres in 2 days. And he did this with the juvenile as well. And it's very important to know this because a lot of the tracking programs, a lot of the poisoning programs are actually based up on the hillsides and are following the ridges where the roads are. And if we were to kill him when he's on that walk, then he won't return to his site, then his site could be invaded by another dog, such as during breeding season, that are travelling around the site, and that dog could then take over the pack and take over the territory, and you'll have chaos. So I've managed to work out this sort of conceptual model. If you take the core areas, these dark black circles, and the home range is these circles on the outside, all these arrows in the centre is where they'll be doing their daily border patrols or their weekly border patrols. And these arrows through the middle is where the animals are moving during the breeding season. So it's sort of showing this complex nature of how dingoes are functioning in the ecosystem. So they have that predatory cycle when they eat certain prey at certain times, and they also have this movement cycle to protect their area and possibly to find mates. Now this is some footage from back in the day that I'd collected from between 2004 and 2007. This guy actually walked off with that pup. We don't know where he went. You can see just there, the juvenile ran away when the adults chased the kangaroo to the water. This is, there was a story that I wrote, or an observation I made on dingoes hunting kangaroos in water, because normally the dingoes will stop. And in this bit of footage, you can see the adults are just sitting around whilst the pups were killing the kangaroo. That's Stephen Dunleavy from Humblebee Films. He's mates with David Attenborough. And this is the footage I helped him to collect when he came out in 2010. So since he was working, for the last 2 years in between that, we've worked together to start to get more footage. So this is how a fox and eastern grey kangaroo interact, just to show you the difference, again, between a mesocarnivore and a hypercarnivore. Kangaroos aren't scared of a fox. Oh, going for a bird. Well, again. And these are how the pups react to a bird. This is when I'd go out looking for dingoes and come back and sometimes find the cameraman sleeping. But he'd still get good footage such as this. Oh, sorry, playing again. We managed to document a whole heap of different things, so vocal communication, body communication, interactions. I've got so much data now, we've got about 450,000 frames from 300 minutes or more of footage. It's going to take me a while to actually analyse it, but we'll get there. And this is just a bit of more background to the documentary. So first thing that they wanted was a birth. And you know they can't film birthing in the wild because if they go to a den site, then the dingoes will move the pups. They won't be able to get to it. So they constructed this birthing suite. That's what it looked like. Is the footage they got?
To a litter of about 6 pups. Male gives birth to a litter.
And we got stuff like the dingo bounce. It's not the technical term, I'll have to figure out something else, but
No, that's the word we all use, Brad.
there was nursing females at each of the den sites. So this was the Murphy's Pack den site, and we were down there in the hide, and she was sort of sussing us out. And I was in the car right here, and this female from Campbell's Creek came walking straight up to us saying, "What the hell is going on? I've got pups to protect." And this is introducing Murphy's Pack. Now I wanted to name them after the South Park characters. But technically I should call him like Long Left Paw, because he had a long white mark on his left paw, and Kenny was the runt. And then the black guy had to be called Token, because he was the only black one in the pack. But in the movie we called him Ulu, after the Gundungurra word for only. And then here it's interesting to watch this pup react when he gets smacked in the head with a wombat skull. And right underneath him there was a kangaroo tail. This footage here, the cameraman said, was some of the most beautiful stuff he's ever filmed. We were doing this for about 2 hours. Just the way the adults and the pups were interacting. And then one afternoon, one of the dogs brought back a swamp lily tail. So I think what they're starting to do is teach the pups about what smells they can eat and what the flavour of the meat is, so when they go hunting they know what to go for. So you can see him here, he's delivering it straight to the pups. Once again, and he was actually even holding some of the pups back so Token or Ulu could get his share. We got to spend about 5 months in the field, so it was a pretty good project to be working on. And then one afternoon, when it was all nice and peaceful, these 4 big bruising males came walking in all aggressively. And we thought they were going to take over the pack. We were sitting up on top of the cliff watching, going, this is going to be A, incredible, and B, almost scary to watch. But it turned out that it had just been members from the pack coming back to see the pups. And now look how the pups are reacting to this guy. They're so submissive, so he's obviously a more dominant animal. You can see here he's starting to convulse to regurgitate food for the pups. The other guy thinks it's a good idea to check out what he's got, so he kicks his udders. And once again, just watch here, watch these pups reacting. Their tails, they're holding their ears low, the tails between their legs. They're very cautious around this adult male. They're showing very, very wolf-like behaviours, and living in wild like this, that's what you want to see the dingo do. Here you can see when we rocked up one morning there was this massive bone that could only come from a cow. The afternoon this female arrived, and she kind of took the pups away with her. And we got there the next day and no one was around, so I put the cameraman down by the river. He filmed this nursing female cross it, and then cross back with a kangaroo tail. So in science you want to find all these consistent trends to be able to make calculated answers. Your pups, and they're sitting on a cow carcass. That's where they'd been moved to, but, you know, someone from National Park said it's amazing how far the dingoes can drag a cow carcass. But this cow was obviously killed on site because there was 3 in the same area and there were feral cattle in the site. This pup here just arrived one day. We saw him on the infrared camera. He looked like he'd crossed the river as well when the river was at a low point, but we don't know where he's come from, and the pups seem to appreciate it, or they just sort of let him join in the fun. And I haven't been out there to find out what they've done with him since, or where the pack has gone since, except they weren't using the den site. This is just a river crossing, which is nice because I get to show you where the cameraman was sitting, and I was sitting up on top of the cliff telling him that a dingo was coming with the radio so he could start filming. And this is how it looked from my angle. Got to determine different vocal cues. So this dingo howled a number of times. I sped it up just because it takes a while. And then suddenly, the cameraman, because he was only filming through a black and white screen, he thought this was the same dog just running around the site, acting strange. But another dog came bolting down to see him. So we don't know still what those vocal communications mean. They're doing some good research at Macquarie University to be able to determine what vocalisations say what or how they're talking to each other. But there's still so much that we don't know. So this pack here is the original pack that was multicoloured. You can see they've actually started to revert back to the tan coloration, or the multicoloured dogs have all been killed and kicked out and the dingoes have taken over. Now when you're watching them hunting from up on top of a cliff, they tend to just go from hilltop to hilltop via the gullies. They'll come back up, scare the kangaroos again, and they'll go back down, and then they'll do that for a whole morning, if not longer. What was the sound recordist, the name of the sound recordist that was with us? And the research assistant, the pommy that was filming this part, was a bit scared because the dingoes were hunting so close to him. And here we can see Campbell's Creek pack. So when Murphy's pack was sitting around the cow carcass, I couldn't really get much more information. So we moved to Campbell's Creek and to the Wops Ridge pack. You can see here how they're all walking in a line and doing all these dingo-like behaviours to help maintain their site, such as raised leg urination. They only had 3 pups. And this was the same pack where we captured the dog that did the border patrol. And believe it or not, when we were up in the helicopter, we found this pack.
Already. They're much more interested in patrolling the border than hunting those kangaroos.
Doing border patrol. It's me getting my David Attenborough on.
Just in front of me, 3 of the pups from Murphy's pack. It's the cow carcass where they've been hanging out. Just a moment ago, Murphy ran off down into the bush. So he's starting to exhibit much more adult-like behaviour.
I'm pretty sure Lily turned out to be a girl.
We'll have to see how it develops over time and what happens. In this place right here, it smells like dingoes, cats, dead cow. It's pretty festive. No,
Adults came back, gave a yelp, and all the pups ran off.
ran up to see how. I don't know where they've gone, because the fun is gone.
And then one afternoon, so there was a bit of tension, right? The director was there saying, where the hell are these dingoes? Why can't we film the dingoes? So I said, well, I'm going to have to disperse you all, put you in all these different sites so you can watch. So I sat the director at this Campbell's Creek site, so that's when he started watching kangaroos actually being hunted. And then he decided to move the main camera there, and after 6 days, so they'd probably been out doing border patrol, after 6 days they came back, and you can see here they started hunting this emu, split into different lines. You can see just here it looks like there's only one dingo that has chased the emu, so he's actually broken off, turns it back around. In just a moment, watch. Another dingo ambushes it. So this is all hunting behaviour that we've never ever documented. Suzanne just said just like wolves.
Yeah.
And this is what makes this the best dingo documentary made in the history of television. Okay, so the emu ran up a hill, it got all slow and only 2 dogs were chasing it. I don't know whether, because they could only film the emu being chased. The other dogs might have run off behind the hill or down the gully, so we don't see what actually happened. But the director said it was perfect because she can cut and the audience are just left in suspense. So, there's been a lot of work in Africa. So when I went to Africa as well as part of this Churchill Fellowship, I was speaking to John Tico McNutt, working with the African wild dogs, and I said, why can't you just use like tiger scent or something else to deter the dingoes or to deter the wild dogs? And he goes, because they don't understand that language. You've got to speak to them in their language. So this guy, I think it's David Osmond, they put these satellite collars on these 2 wolves, and then they put out a biofence just using basic scats. So they put 500 metres apart, they put 1 scat and another scat, and they also did urine as well along this line. And you can see that one season the wolves were actually crossing all the way down through to this yellow part, but after the biofence was put in, the wolves stopped passing it. So that's one way you can keep wolves off farmland. We just need to collect plenty of fresh dingo scats. This is another, you got heaps, don't you?
I got heaps,
There's another good thing about America, right? So they've got so many collars, tracker collars out on wolves in Yellowstone National Park. There's a guy employed there to track them every single day, and they break it down into where the packs are hanging out, and they have all this historical data on the population. So Australians, we don't really have that. There could be a lot more dingoes because they live in smaller territories, but there might be less packs or less infiltration from the packs that are in the middle. So it's just these outer packs that you might need to actually protect from livestock. See that? It's backwards. So in terms of conservation management with dingoes, are we barking up the wrong tree? Do you think we should actually start to adapt and do things a bit differently? So, who can tell me what a dingo is?
Asian wild dog.
It's an Asian wild dog. One way. Yep. What's a hybrid? So pardon? Cross. Yeah, could be. Crossbred between 2 species.
Subspecies.
Subspecies? Sure. So, alright, so we have this, can you see this dilemma coming out? It's all about this naming of the animal, right? So we've got the pure dingoes, the wild dogs, feral dogs, which are basically just domestic dogs that are running wild, and then we also have these hybrids. So speciation, if you can see here from this picture from Churchill, from, what's the name? Darwin. This picture from Darwin, speciation occurs when animals become isolated to the point that they can no longer breed back with each other because they've formed their own lineage, right? So that's what he found by going from island to island. And this here is a red wolf, which could possibly be a coyote crossed with a wolf, and that's why it's developed these red traits. So it's works in one direction, which means the male coyote has to breed with the female wolf, because I think the male wolf will just kill the female coyote, tell her to get out of the range. So if it's between species, I say it's a hybrid, but if it's within species, I don't think we can actually technically call it a hybrid because there's no barriers to breeding. So hybrid speciation is when, these animals go back. Hybrid speciation is when, with the red wolf, you actually start to get this isolated population that can breed within itself. So it's actually quite a rare occurrence. Here we have a mule bred in captivity, a horse crossed with a donkey. We have a liger, which is a really big cat. Tiger crossed with a lion. Doesn't always occur in the wild. Actually, I don't know if we've ever seen it occur in the wild. And down the bottom here, we've got eastern and western grey kangaroo, so a cross between an eastern and a western grey kangaroo where their ranges overlap. And they have quite an extensive overlap region out there. So what do you get when you cross Canis lupus with Canis lupus? They're the same dog.